Okay, look, I know the title of the video elicits a very strong reaction in you. I understand, I get it. But please understand, what I have here, I am not advertising this as fact or an absolute. Only Kubo knows this and only Kubo can truly answer this. What I do have though is something very interesting and arguably very relevant. I'm not making anything up, I'm just pulling from the canon material and I'm stringing it all together into a manner that can be easy to understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide you with the information I have, with my train of thought, and I'll present you with all the evidence that needs to go with it. And then I'll let you decide what you want to do with that information. So with that out of the way, let's begin into what might be a very controversial but definitely interesting video. Okay, let's get started. Ichigo Kurosaki's Bankai is one of the biggest unknowns in the entire Bleach mythos. We straight up don't know what it does, but there are aspects of Ichigo's Bankai that we do know, and it will help us piece everything together in this very complicated puzzle. So let's start from here. The old Bankai that you know Ichigo having, you know, the black one that he uses in the Soul Society arc and through the Ranka arc and into the Fullbring arc, yeah, that Bankai, not only do we want to consider it not Ichigo's real Bankai, I don't even want to consider it a Bankai at all. Case in point, chapter 127 of Bleach. Yoruichi is teaching Ichigo how to attain a Bankai using a technique and a device called the Tenshintai. This device will allow Ichigo to forcibly manifest the soul of his Zanpakuto into the physical, quote, spiritual realm, because it's Bleach and they're in the Soul Society. The Zanpakuto spirit that showed up was not white, but Old Man Zangetsu, so clearly there's a mistake there. Not only that, Kubo doesn't show us Ichigo actually attain Bankai. We know what he's supposed to do and we see them training together, but we don't actually see Ichigo attain it. The next thing we know, he's at Sogeku Hill fighting Byakuya and blocking the Sogeku and so on and so forth. So we don't actually see Ichigo attain Bankai. To go even further than that, in chapter 219, when Ichigo is training to master his hollow powers, he goes Bankai and White also goes Bankai. And right after he does that, he asks White, when did you learn Bankai? How are you able to use this move? And you know what White says? White says, Bankai, this move, I learned it the exact same time you did. Which is also very weird for someone who's supposed to be your actual Soul Reaper powers. How is he learning Bankai? Very fraudulent. Look back to the battle between Ichigo Kurosaki and Byakuya Kuchiki. You see Byakuya actually come out flat out and say, that thing you have there, that is not Bankai. Now, of course, some people look at that and say Byakuya is just being arrogant, and I would agree that he is being arrogant. But this is Bleach and this is Kubo we're talking about. It is not beyond the realm of possibility that Kubo is making a play of words and double meanings here, where Byakuya is talking from an arrogant perspective, 100%. But it is also equally possible that Byakuya is saying this because Kubo wants to throw it out there, foreshadowing that the Bankai Ichigo currently has is not his real Bankai. Now, of course, Old Man Zangetsu and White Ichigo do share a body, so maybe you could look at this and say White Ichigo was present in some capacity, and I want to understand because at the end of the day, the name of Ichigo's Bankai is correct, but the ability of Ichigo's old Bankai, being that it gives him speed, as Grimchow says, it just gives you average speed, that doesn't make any sense within the concept, within the mythos of Bleach, for Bankai to simply just give speed. That's just very irregular. For Ichigo, of all people, a character being made up of Hollow Shinigami Fullbring, where you say this dude's main Bankai ability is speed, it makes no sense altogether. Everything here all lends itself to this point. Ichigo's old Bankai, it's not just not his real Bankai, it's also fundamentally not even a real Bankai. It lacks a lot of the spiritual essences that make a Bankai a true Bankai. Secondly, I know within the world of Bleach, White is considered the source of Ichigo's Soul Reaper powers, being that his Shinigami powers melded with his hollow powers, and so together it's like his Ranka power. So White is the true essence and the true origin and the source of Ichigo's Soul Reaper powers. That concept is true, but only up until the Blade is Me arc. After the Blade is Me, White is no longer considered the sole origin or the sole source of Ichigo's powers. Old Man Zangetsu is just as Zangetsu as White is Zangetsu himself, and the reason why we know this, and the reason why I say this, is based on what Kubo himself shows and what the anime adds on. The reason Ichigo has two Zanpakuto is to be representative of two Zanpakuto spirits, one being White and the other being Old Man Zangetsu. If you look back to the moment itself, you see that when Old Man Zangetsu does this, and then the sword shows up, it's just one single blade. When Nimai is actually forging the sword in of itself, it's just one single blade. All right, but even when Ichigo reaches for the sword, it's one single blade. It's always shown to be one blade, and then as Ichigo is descending within the depths of the waters inside his inner world, he talks to both White and Old Man Zangetsu, and he tells them that there were no lies in your words or his. In my mind, both of you are Zangetsu. Is that okay, Zangetsu? And then he plunges both of his hands into the fire, and from there pours his energy into it and draws out two Zanpakuto. Nimai was forging one, Zangetsu stood aside to show one, Ichigo grabbed one, but then what he had afterwards were two. Why is that? Because Ichigo himself decided that he was going to have both the spirits be the manifestation of his soul reaper powers. And so this ideology that White is the origin or the source of Ichigo's soul reaper powers is true, but only up until the blade is me. After the blade is me, the reason he has two swords is because he has two Zanpakuto spirits. That's the point. There's Quincy stuff going on 100%, but we have to agree on that second point together. So then, the first one, we did that. The second one, we've done it. We've got to agree on that to begin with. Okay, so with all that out of the way, we need to take a trip. This trip we're taking is to back into the Bleach world, back into Bleach history, back into the Bleach mythos, millions and millions of years in the past, into the origin, before everything was, before what we know to be Bleach was Bleach. We're headed back to the time of the Soul King. Now, the Soul King is a being who, quote, appeared out of nowhere to protect the humans from the Hollows. Now, he is a being characterized by Shinigami, Quincy, human/Fullbring abilities. That is where the concept of the Soul King's candidate comes into play. Now, it doesn't really do much in the Bleach manga, but in the novels is a very important subplot. It's a very important concept in that there are certain beings who possess the qualities to become what we essentially call Soul King candidates, in that if in the event that the Soul King dies or the Soul King can no longer do its job, we need somebody who could stand in theoretically. Characters like that include Yhwach, Hikone, Ginjo Kugo, and Ichigo Kurosaki. Now Hikone, sure. Yhwach, sure. Ichigo, sure. Ginjo, it's kind of weird to think about. Kubo needs to do a little bit more explaining on that part, because I don't know how Ginjo's a Quincy. I'm not too sure about that. But the other three, absolutely. And so keep that in mind, this concept of the Soul King's candidate, and more importantly, the fact that the Soul King himself was human/Fullbring, Shinigami, and Quincy. He was not hollow. That's important. He was not hollow. Another thing that's important to note is that the first sighting of the Almighty chronologically within the world of Bleach, so not for us, but chronologically as history would have told it, the first individual to possess the power of the Almighty, the most powerful force within the entire Bleach world, was the Soul King. He possessed the Almighty. The ancestors of the noble families utilized the power of the Almighty to create the world as we know it, and Ichigo Kurosaki speaks as to how the Soul King himself could see into the future, and for whatever reason, whatever he saw gave him the desire to give himself up into the fighting to against the noble ancestors, and essentially got himself mutilated and left without will, speech, or anything else. And he saw into the future, and for whatever reason, whatever he saw made him give himself up. So we know that for a fact. The Soul King was the first person to possess the power of the Almighty. So you take the concept of the kind of being he is, you connect that to the fact that he has the power of the Almighty. Keep that in mind as we're going. These are very important points. Here's another very important point. As admitted by Yhwach himself, he is unable to see the futures of things that have a connection to the Soul King. What does that mean? If you are a fragment of the Soul King, or you have a connection with the Soul King to any degree, I don't want to say to any degree, but if you have a direct connection to the Soul King, Yhwach's Almighty will not work. We know this when Yhwach killed the Soul King, or I guess when Ichigo did it, whichever you want to go with. But when the Soul King died, Mimihagi went from the Slarite all the way up to the Soul King's palace and took place of the Soul King. Yhwach did not see this coming, and he actually goes out to say that this was beyond my vision. I could not see this coming because it was the Soul King himself. So that is very important. The Almighty has limits. One of its limitations, Yhwach cannot see the futures of those with a direct connection to the Soul King. So of course, you might be wondering, well, Rebirth, what does this have to do with Ichigo's Bankai? Well, first of all, I'm sure you guys know where I'm going with this, and second of all, it's fun to build to where we're going, so please just stick along for the ride. It'll be worth it, I promise. So, now that the Almighty seems to be a very important recurring theme throughout this video, here's a very important question. What do we know about what it takes to be one to be able to possess the powers of the Almighty. Now, of course, we don't have a lot of information on this, being that only 2 individuals have been able to utilize the Almighty. I'm not counting Jogrim Hashforth because his is a completely different pot of tea, which I'll get into in a different video, maybe. But there's only 2 characters that we've known within the Bleach mythos to utilize the power of the Almighty. It's the Soul King himself and Yhwach. So then you start to think, what's the connection shared here? This is where things get extremely complicated. And you know what? If you don't really A, understand it, or B, think that this is the case, I'm 100% with you, but at least hear me out. It's quite interesting, but it's up to you to decide whether you want to go with this or not, alright? Now, the Soul King himself, when he showed up, Kubo doesn't say where he came from per se. All we know is that he appeared. But one of the more important concepts that's introduced in the novels is this idea of progression, regression, and more importantly, the will of the universe itself, to use a different phrase, in that there seems to be a very recurring theme within all of this, that the universe itself, the world of Bleach itself, seems to have a will, and its will is specifically against anything that causes stagnation, that causes there to be stillness. What does that mean? When the world was initially born, again, Kubo's going to have to do a lot of explaining on what was before everything, but there's just a meshing of death and life and the cycle of death and rebirth and resurrection and Ryotsu. It's just a bunch of chaos, all right? Eventually, humans are not created. They just sort of show up as a result of all the coalescence of spiritual pressures that's happening. Humans show up, Shinigami show up, and all these beings seem to show up. Eventually, the world, in accordance to its will to defy stillness, has these hollows show up. And then these hollows start killing the humans, and that in and of itself causes stillness. It causes stagnation, because now the hollows are so much stronger, they're just eating the humans, causing the world to stagnate into a world where hollows are eating humans. As a result, this world gives rise to a new being. And Ichigo Kurosaki actually says that it's as though the world itself wanted to fight against this sense of stillness, this sense of stagnation. And it gave rise to this being we came to call the Soul King. All right, and the Soul King was born, was brought forth with the ability of the Almighty already given to him, already possessed by him. And the connection here, I think, is that he is human, Fullbring, Quincy, and Shinigami. Now, if you take that idea and you look at, so take that idea, put it to the side, think about Yhwach. Kubo doesn't really tell us what Yuha's origin is. We pick up from the point at which he's a baby. We don't know whose kid he is. We don't know if he's just a kid. It's just, oh, he's a baby. And then he just starts talking. And I'm like, okay, I don't know where this baby comes from. But the important thing that we know about this baby is that, you know, he couldn't see, he couldn't speak, he couldn't do anything. Even though everyone thought he was going to die, he himself knew that he would live. And whenever a person would make contact with the baby, touch the baby in any way, fragments of the baby's soul would be given to this person, which would then heal their ailments. It could be literal, it could be physical, it could be courage, it could be intangible things like that. Anything within that person that was considered not whole would become whole, but it would rob them of their lifespan. They would die soon after, and when they died, all their skills, all their abilities, they use the word ability specifically, all their knowledge, everything that they've amassed in their entire life, we transported back to the baby, and the baby started growing in power and so on and so forth. So to me, I think, I can't prove this part is theoretical, that the reason why Yhwach is the Soul King's candidate, A, is because he absorbed the Soul King, but also B, because he absorbed the abilities of a ton of people, making him very similar to the Soul King in the connection he has to all these different races, but also similar to who? Ichigo Kurosaki. Let's go on. This concept of progress and regress that I keep talking about in reference to what was happening in the old world before when the Soul King initially appeared is still there. I think it's still at play throughout the entire story of Bleach, and you'll see this theme run through the entirety of it, in that the world was just coalescing. It was a bunch of nothing, stagnation, and so hollows, humans, and all these people show up, and the hollows start eating the humans. So now we've swung one way, now it's stagnant. So what does the world do? The world gives rise to the Soul King with the powers of the Almighty swinging it the other way. But now the Soul King is killing the hollows. He's not purifying them, he's killing them, and that in of itself is causing a different kind of stagnation. So what does the world do? The world elicits this rebellion by the noble houses, who then mutilate the Soul King, set up a new system which breeds a new kind of stagnation. And that in turn gives rise to who? It gives rise to Yuha Baha himself, with the power of the Almighty, to do the opposite thing that the Soul King did. The Soul King here came in defense of the humans against the Hollows. Yuha Baha here is coming in defense of the Quincy's against the Shinigami now. And he wages war on them in order to return the world to the way it was before. There's a concept of stillness, stagnation, back and forth, progress and regression. All right, and Kubo actually implements this idea in the Soul King's body parts, in that the left arm of the Soul King is called the left arm of stillness, and the right arm is called the right arm of progress, the right hand of, I think, right arm of progress. So this idea of progress and regression is actually incorporated in the body parts of the Soul King itself. So maybe you guys are seeing where I'm going with this, maybe not. But this idea of the world almost having a desire to grant individuals these titanic powers that are able to shape entire eras and generations, happening with the Soul King first, and then with Yuha Baha, there's another swing meant to happen. There's another return meant to happen. And the one character within the mythos of Bleach who would satisfy these requirements in having a connection to the Soul King, being that Ichigo is referred to as Yuha's son, and Yuha refers to himself as the Soul King's son, and in that the Soul King is his father. Obviously, the Soul King did not have any biological children, so he's speaking on a different level. And yes, I know that that Yuha was calling other Quincy's his sons. I understand that, but Yuha knew that Ichigo was special. He understood that. That's just a known fact. Ichigo is different from everybody else. I just have to wonder if this universal desire by the world's will and the world of Bleach desired a return and granted the third person within the world of Bleach the powers of the Almighty. First, Soul King, then Yuha, then Ichigo. When Ichigo goes Bankai against Yuha, Yuha destroys Ichigo's Bankai using the powers of the Almighty because he fears it. It's a truly powerful Bankai and Yuha wants nothing to do with it. Now, there are very few things that would cause and give reason for Yuha to not even want to fight against it, to the point that he uses his power to destroy it. Very few. I can't even tell you what it is, all right? Unless, of course, Yuha realizes exactly what's about to happen and does not want a confrontation between an almighty ability and another almighty-like ability. He doesn't want that, and so he destroys Ichigo's Bankai before he can use it. But even with that, there's still more interesting things at play. Because you see, you know how I mentioned before that Yuha Baha is unable, he can't see the future of things that are directly connected to the Soul King. With Mimihage, for example, he cannot see the future of the fragments of the Soul King or anything that has a deep connection to the Soul King. So you think about Ichigo here. Ichigo does not have a direct relationship to the Soul King. They're connected in that the Soul King is the same kind of being that Ichigo is, in that Ichigo could play his role, except Ichigo doesn't have the Almighty. That's the one thing Ichigo doesn't have. Ichigo has everything that the Soul King had except the Almighty, which is why I think that that's exactly what Ichigo has. Anyway, if Ichigo doesn't have a direct connection to the Soul King, I'd say Ichigo has more of an indirect connection. His connection to the Soul King is through Yuha, because he is a descendant of Yuha, and Yuha is a son of the Soul King. Not biological, but Yuha does have a legitimate connection to the Soul King. They both have the almighty power, and they are both candidates of the same kind. Ichigo is also a candidate of the same kind, except he doesn't have the almighty. So there is a connection. So then it begs the question, what impact does the almighty have on Ichigo Kurosaki? And is there any connection we can find there? Well, we look into the mythos of Bleach, you look into the Bleach canon, and you find that Yuha believes that he can see Ichigo's future, but the canon events in of themselves lend me to believe that while Yuha might think he can see it, he cannot see it as clearly and accurately as he thinks he can. Ichigo goes Bankai and he breaks it, thinking himself to have broken it. All of us were like, well, I mean, Ginjo, Sugishima, and Orihime came to heal it. Well, why didn't he know that would happen? Why did he leave? And then we find out that, oh, actually, I knew that you would restore your Bankai some way. I knew that you would find your way to me, but I knew that it would break once again once you appeared in front of me for the second time. Now, obviously, that's not true because A, that wasn't Ichigo, and B, it didn't work. He even goes as far as to say that I just tried to destroy your Bankai. You must have some incredibly good fortune Ichigo. So right here, we're beginning to see a very different, more sophisticated version of Yuha keeps trying to use the Almighty on Ichigo, but it keeps not working. Obviously, Aizen is here playing his part, absolutely, but there is a clear thread that says Yuha thinks he can see Ichigo's future and alter it, and he can to a certain degree, but he cannot see and affect it as accurately as he thinks he can. This is the biggest admission to this perspective. Yuha Baha, before his battle with Ichigo, has a dream where he's asleep, unconscious, unaware, and vulnerable. Ichigo, with his old Shinigami Shikai, cuts him and delivers a fatal blow. He opens his eyes and thinks it's nothing but a dream. At the end of everything, after all the fighting, after all the shenanigans, after all the assholes, if you want to call it that, Ichigo, using his old Shikai, catches Yuha vulnerable and slices him in half, dealing a fatal blow. In that moment, Yuha remembers his dream and thinks, oh, I thought it was just Hasward showing me a dream, but that vision I saw was a vision of the future indeed. But he didn't take it seriously because he didn't think that that was the case. Yuha is unable to accurately predict or accurately foresee into Ichigo's future. Why? Because Ichigo has a connection to the Soul King, as opposed to Mimihagi, who has a direct connection in that Mimihagi is literally the arm of the Soul King, a fragment of the Soul King, literally. Yuha just couldn't see anything, period. But in Ichigo's case, his connection isn't direct, it's indirect. So Yuha can see some things, he just can't see all of it, but he himself he wasn't able to piece it together that there was this connection there, or rather that his abilities were waning, or his abilities weren't as effective as he wanted it to be, and that ultimately became his undoing. Obviously, there's still Silver plotline here as well, which we can talk about in a later video, because there's a lot. I'm already talking about a lot of things here, but I think that Ichigo's indirect connection to the Soul King, coupled with the direct connection that Mimihagi has to the Soul King, lends me to believe that the reason Ichigo's Bankai and Ichigo's everything about Ichigo just seemed to continue to persevere despite all the things that Yuha was doing is because Yuha's Almighty is unable to see or accurately see the future of things that are connected to the Soul King. Because you have to understand that Yuha's Almighty is the power to see the future and to alter it, and more importantly, everything that he sees becomes powerless to stop him. If he can see it, it will not affect him, it will not kill him. That's exactly how he beat Ichibei. Yuha's direct words to Ichibei are, all powers I have come to know turn to my side, becoming unable to do me harm, much less kill me. Now obviously some powers can harm him, but the idea here with the Almighty is, if he can see it, it may harm him depending on how powerful the ability is, but it will not kill him. And the fact, as we saw, that even to that point, Yuha is able to rewrite futures even when he has died is proof of just how far this ability is going to go. But when it comes to Ichigo Kurosaki, Yuha Baha does not seem to have that same effect. Why? In my opinion, it's because Ichigo has an indirect connection to the Soul King. And so that ideology, that entire, thematic undertone to the story of Bleach and to the final arc and so on, coupled with Kubo very strikingly, specifically, having Ichigo say quotes that are defiant of fate, that are persevering in spite of a foregone conclusion or in spite of an event that cannot be abated, and specifically the phrase that says, give me a blade and enough strength to shatter fate. I think people have said that Ichigo's Bankai could possibly have the abilities of fate manipulation to a certain degree, and I would have to concur, although more so than fate manipulation in terms of it's just sort of, because when the ideology first came up, it was like, well, fate manipulation just seems so out of left field. But once you consider the Almighty is the power to alter the future. That in of itself, future altering, is a version of fate manipulation. And so when you take that idea, I'm trying to put everything together here. I know it's crazy. I'm just putting everything together here. When you take that idea of the Soul King being the first person to have the Almighty and being able to see into the far future using this power, and him specifically not earning the power per se. He appeared and he already had it. And we know what kind of person he was, being that he was Shinigami, he was Quincy, he was human, and he was Fullbringer. That's all we know. And then you have Yuha Ba, who's literal origin we don't know about. It's almost as if he was just chosen by fate itself, by the universe itself, to have this power of the Almighty. But it's also of a multiracial aspect, or a multiracial degree. You didn't have Ichigo, who has a connection to Yuha, who has a connection to the Soul King. You have Ichigo, who is also of a multiracial, it feels weird using that phrase, but you have Ichigo here, who's also Shinigami, human, hollow, and Quincy, Fullbring, and human as well. I hope I said human before. You put all of these things together, and I think, hey, is it so strange that Ichigo's abilities could be considered fate manipulation? Or rather, just to put it straightforward, to just say it as it is, I think Ichigo Kurosaki's Bankai gives him the powers of the Almighty, just not to the degree that Yhwach and the Soul King were able to use it. I think that the world of Bleach itself, as time goes on, decides and chooses certain people who have the characteristics worthy to wield the power of the Almighty. It starts from a Shinigami base and then adds on human, Fullbring, Quincy, being the Soul King. And then it goes to a Quincy base and adds on human and everything else that makes Yuha who he is. And then it goes to Ichigo, who is human, and adds on this other stuff. It's almost like the Avatar cycle, where it starts, like, it's weird, but it's almost like the Avatar cycle where they have access to all 4 elements, but they still have a base, where it goes, I've forgotten what the order is, where it goes, I guess, Earth? No, it goes wind, water, earth, fire. Yeah, it goes air, water, earth, and fire, but they still have access to all 4, but their starting point is of one element, and then the cycle goes on to the next. I think the Soul King, so the base being Shinigami, and you have Yuha, the base being Quincy. I think next in line, you got Ichigo with the base being human. And then whoever next is going to be. But I just really think that the world of Bleach itself seems to be choosing these people whenever there's need to cause change that affects generations, whenever there's a need to stop and fight against stagnation, to cause the world to move in one direction or the other. Soul King moves into Yuha, moves into Ichigo, and we'll see where it moves into next, which between you and me, I'm talking Kazue. And I'll say that, so I put that to the side. So that's my theory. Ichigo Kurosaki's Bankai gives him the ability of the Almighty, just not as effective as Yhwach and the Soul King, but I do think it does that in a more sly, underhanded manner, where you don't necessarily feel like it's happening, but it just seems like everything is working in his favor to get to that point, and Yhwach himself cannot seem to stop it. It's like there is a will of the universe pushing Ichigo to get to this point, and that's his almighty abilities at work. If you take that concept that I've established, after Ichigo kills Yhwach, the world then goes into a state of calm and stillness again. Now, if you're going based on what I've described, the world is going to want to change again. The world is going to want to shift again. Where do we go from here? If we go, like we've gone, I think Aizen even plays an important part in this, where we go, you can think of it this way. You can think of Aizen, you can think of the sequences going as Soul King Shinigami to Quincy Yuha, to Aizen Hollow, because Aizen's stuff really had to do with hollow things, to Ichigo human. What's left? Coincidentally, Kubo had the choice of where to take Bleach's story next, and he coincidentally decides that it's time for Hell to jump into action. Why now? Why is Hell jumping into action now? It almost feels to me that the world, this figure, this ability, this theme, this essence, which seems to hate things being stagnated, saw Ichigo kill Yuha and usher in a world of peace and stagnation, and said, no. And now Hell says it's my turn. It's my turn to create some chaos. And I think the next person in line for all of this, the next person in line to be the deciding factor, to push the world into its next era, into the next generation, into the next phase, is one Kazue Kurosaki. But then again, we'll see what Kubo cooks on that front. But I think there is a beautiful connection within the mythos of Bleach that I think is very, very beautiful. There are pros and cons to this. Of course there are, because if indeed the world itself seems to be selecting these individuals who fall into the category of soul types that possess the Almighty, it then sort of takes away Ichigo's autonomy, almost as if fate is beckoning Ichigo to do these things, in that Ichigo just can't lose because the world needs him to win, that is negative if that's the case. It's like, it takes away from Ichigo's choice in his battles and everything he did to get here. But also in a certain different way, if that is true, it does make sense because he is one who seemingly has the power of fate manipulation or future altering. And so it does make sense in that regard, but it would diminish the story character elements of Ichigo a tad bit. So I've rambled long enough. I've spoken a lot. I apologize if I felt that I was repeating things. I really do apologize. It's just that this was such a big topic that my Bleach mind is just racing. So I do understand if you guys think that it's not possible. Maybe you think I'm reaching. I'm fully with you. I fully understand. What I want to do with this is to show you that there is a connection here across all these different chapters in the novels and the books. There's a connection here, and there seems to be a puzzle or an image hidden within the chaos. And I've tried to clean it up a little bit, but you can see that even I can't quite see everything for what it is. There's still an element that even I don't quite understand. And so if you've heard what I'm saying and you have a better way to view this, or you have a place that this could go next, or you have thoughts, you have comments, you have additions, let me know in the comment section down below. And if you enjoy videos like this, if you enjoy this content, please do hit the subscribe button for more. I'm a Bleach fan, I'm a Bleach YouTuber, I cover other series. Bleach is my main, look behind me. I'm all Bleach, you can tell. So with the anime coming up, I'm going to be giving you a ton of great content. So please be sure to subscribe in order to not miss any of the content I have in the future. This is your boy Rebirth. Until the next Bleach video, Professor of Kabology signing out. Peace.